Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Romel Dueñas, and my topic for today is on introduction to autonomic pharmacology as well as drugs acting the parasympathetic nervous system. The nervous system is divided into central and peripheral. The central includes the brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system includes autonomic and somatic. The peripheral nervous system is independent and autonomous. Activities that are not under direct conscious control. These include cardiac output, blood flow to various organs, and digestion. On the other hand, somatic is consciously controlled movement, like respiration, and this may be partly conscious because sometimes you can hold your breath or you can consciously breathe faster. And posture is also a somatic control. Let us differentiate the autonomic and somatic nervous system. Autonomic involves mostly the visceral organs, meaning there's an involuntary control, while the somatic nervous system involves the skeletal, so meaning the motor, and it is voluntary. Peripheral ganglia and plexuses are present in autonomic that is absent in somatic. Postganglionic fibers and unmyelinated is present in autonomic nervous system, in contrast to the somatic where there are myelinated motor nerve and to skeletal muscles. So spontaneous activity is observed in autonomic, while interruption of impulses can cause paralysis and atrophy in somatic nervous system. This is the schematic diagram of the autonomic nervous system that we will discuss. The spinal nerves in parasympathetic includes cranial nerve 3, 7, 9, 10, and sacral 3 and 4. So that is craniosacral. While in the sympathetic, it's the thoracolumbar, so that's T1 to T12 and L1 to L5. While the location of the ganglia is near the organ in parasympathetic, while paravertebral is in the sympathetic. The ganglionic fiber are almost all are myelinated except for the parasympathetic, which are unmyelinated, while the postganglionic and preganglionic ratio 1:1 for the parasympathetic and 1:20 or more in the sympathetic. The segmental distribution is at the same segmental level in parasympathetic, and there are synapses over several levels in the sympathetic. They differ as well in the chemical mediator. Acetylcholine is more on the parasympathetic, so that you will hear later, and norepinephrine for sympathetic. The type of response is localized, while in sympathetic it's the so-called flight or fight. And the type of neuronal system is hierarchical and diffuse in the sympathetic nervous system. Where is the release of the chemical mediator happens? The release of norepinephrine is only in the postganglionic sympathetic, while the release of your acetylcholine are on all preganglionic efferent autonomic and somatic motor, all the parasympathetic, some of the postganglionic sympathetic, and even this acetylcholine blocks the ganglia in non-selective, and this is the block on both the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. And this is the rationale of giving drugs that target the effector organ that is a more specific action. So this is the favorite drug of the anesthesiologist because it is short-acting and it will stimulate both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. So remember that all peripheral nerves are cholinergic except sympathetic postganglionic fiber, while acetylcholine binds both to muscarinic and nicotinic receptor And the nicotinic receptor is located in the ganglion and the neuromuscular junction. Let us now look on the synthesis, the storage, the release, and the attachment to the receptor, as well as the degradation and uptake of these chemical mediators. Let's start with the cholinergic transmission. So that is the synthesis of your acetylcholine. So this acetylcholine is reproduced when the choline merges with the acetyl group from acetyl coenzyme A, or the acetyl-CoA. So this is through the catalytic action of enzyme, the CHAT, which is the choline acetyltransferase. And acetyl-CoA is synthesized in the mitochondria. Once acetylcholine is formed, it is then transported from the cytoplasm to the vesicle via the VAT, or the vesicle-associated transporter. So it's the transporter, and this is stored in the vesicles, and the storage of your acetylcholine is inhibited by vesamicol. And most of the vesicular acetylcholine is bound to a negatively charged VPG, or your vesicular proteoglycan. Furthermore, when an action potential reaches the terminal, it triggers the influx of calcium, that is through the voltage-gated calcium channel. So this calcium interacts with your VAMP synaptotagmin on the vesicle membrane, and it then triggers the fusion of vesicle membrane, and it opens its pores into the presynaptic terminal via exocytosis. So this release is inhibited by botulinum toxin. Once acetylcholine is released, it binds to the cholinergic receptor, and this is a very rapid process. At fast cholinergic synapses, the acetylcholine is hydrolyzed in less than or equal to 1 millisecond by the acetylcholinesterase. And this acetylcholine is hardly or any time to bind again to another receptor. All the acetylcholine that is released diffuses within the range of an acetylcholinesterase molecule, and hence this is degraded into choline and acetate, thereby terminate the action of the transmitter. The rate-limiting step is when choline re-enters the neuron via a sodium symport through active transport reuptake of choline into the cell. So this choline is transported from the extracellular fluid into the neuronal terminal by a sodium-dependent membrane, the CHT, or the so-called choline transporter. And this is blocked by hemicholinums. So the cholinergic transmission from the synthesis, the storage, the release after the voltage-gated calcium enter, and that will release your acetylcholine, and this is attached to the receptor, but that's very fast, and it is subsequently degraded by acetylcholinesterase, and your choline is reuptake, which is the rate-limiting enzyme. So there are drugs that may interrupt this several processes. The adrenergic transmission is almost the same with that of the cholinergic, except for some. Like the precursor of your adrenergic is tyrosine. So this is the conversion of your tyrosine to dopa through your tyrosine hydroxylase, which is actually the rate-limiting step. And the conversion of dopa to dopamine with your dopamine decarboxylase, and your dopamine to norepinephrine by the dopamine beta hydroxylase. The other difference is that norepinephrine is not degraded, unlike in acetylcholine. And it is recycled by reuptake mechanism, metabolized, and diffusion away from the synapse. And the action potential opens the voltage-gated sensitive calcium channel with an increased intracellular calcium that leads to the fusion of vesicle with the surface membrane that results to the expulsion of the norepinephrine. And norepinephrine diffuses out of the cleft or transported into the cytoplasm of terminal through the norepinephrine transporter, so that is the NET. And the reuptake can be blocked by cocaine, methamphetamine, so those are some of the drugs that may affect this adrenergic transmission. So, tapos na tayo sa transmission. So, let's now talk about the receptor. So, unahin natin ang adrenergic receptor. There are only two, the alpha and beta, and they differ in that this alpha is located in the vascular smooth muscle, the presynaptic nerve terminal, the platelets, lipocytes, neurons in the CNS, and they have two subtypes, the alpha 1 and alpha 2. While your beta, that is located in the smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and some of the nerve terminals and lipocytes in CNS, and there are three subtypes of beta, the beta 1, beta 2, and beta 3. The neurotransmitters that are involved here is the norepinephrine and epinephrine, while the receptor type is the so-called GPCR, or the G-coupled or the G-protein coupled receptor. So you will hear more on this on the next topic by Dr. Aben Cruz next week. Okay, so cholinergic receptors naman, and there are two. You have the muscarinic and nicotinic. So the muscarine is from the Amanita muscarium or the mushrooms, and acetylcholine, while your nicotine is from tobacco. The receptor type in muscarinic is GPCR or the G-protein coupled receptor, while in nicotinic, it's different and it's the ligand-gated ion channel. The location of the muscarinic is in the smooth muscle and cardiac muscles, while nicotinic is located in the ganglia, the CNS, and the neuromuscular junction. There are 5 subtypes in muscarinic. Your M1 more on the gastric parietal cells, your M2 is on the cardiac and smooth muscles, and M3 is in the exocrine glands and smooth muscle. While the subtypes of the nicotinic is located in the ganglion receptors and the neuromuscular receptor. So remember that the nicotinic has the ganglion receptor and the neuromuscular receptors. These muscarinic cholinergic receptors are G-protein link membrane receptor. So you have to keep that in mind. And that was discussed in your pharmacodynamics. So to differentiate the different muscarinic receptors, the M1, M3, and M5, the G protein is the GQ, and the post-receptor mechanism is through the inositol triphosphate and diacylglycerol cascade, while your M2 and M4, it involves the inhibition of your cyclic AMP production, and that is the activation of potassium channel, and that is with your G1 receptor. So it's easy to look at that because that's just the alternate of GQGI, GQGI, GQ. This is about the nicotinic cholinergic receptors. And what are the targets of your nicotinic receptor? So that involves the neuromuscular junction and the ganglion. So that is how they differentiate the two types, the muscle type and the neuronal type. The receptor type in the muscle or in the skeletal neuromuscular junction involves the ion channel or the ionotropic, while the neuronal is more on the membrane receptor linked to G protein, and that is your metabotropic. They differ as well in the different properties. Pentameric in structure is the muscle type, while the neuronal type is composed of 8 subtypes of alpha subunit and 4 types of your beta subunit. So that is more diverse. While the cellular effect is opening the cation channel and causing the membrane depolarization. And of course, the function is more of a neuromuscular transmission with the muscle type and ganglion transmission with the neuronal type. Always remember that the nicotinic receptors are ligand-gated ion channels. So when the ligand or when the two acetylcholine molecules bind to the alpha subunit of the nicotinic receptor or your NACHR, a conformational change in the latter takes place, resulting to opening of potassium and sodium selective channel, and the influx of this cation depolarizes the cell membrane. This table shows the different agonists and antagonists at the nicotinic cholinergic receptors. So whether that is located in the muscle type or the neuronal type. This is the relationship of para and sympathetic nervous system. If you look at the diagram, the organs may be innervated by either para or sympa. Just like in the heart, it can be innervated by both the peripheral and central nervous system. But since the heart is predominantly cholinergic, if you remove the adrenergic influence, nothing will happen. But if you remove the cholinergic influence, the heart will beat faster. In contrast to the arterioles and veins, that if you remove the adrenergic, it can cause dilatation, and also your sweat glands and palms and soles, that is the predominant tone is adrenergic. The adrenergic and cholinergic can also produce opposite and similar effects. The gut, it can increase motility and defecation, and that is a para effect, while it can reduce the peristalsis, then that is the sympathetic nervous system effect. The bladder can cause urination or retention as the opposite, or the heart can decrease contractility and heart rate, and with the sympathetic effect, it can increase the heart rate. Only one division that is innervated by the autonomic, that includes the primarily sympathetic nervous system, so that is your sweat glands, resistance arteries, and as well as the most of the blood vessel. While the parasympathetic only is your bronchial smooth muscle. There are no fibers for norepinephrine, but still has adrenergic receptors, and that will respond with beta-2 agonists like your salbutamol that is used for asthma. So the bronchial smooth muscles have no sympathetic innervation, but there are beta-2 receptors which rely on circulating norepinephrine in the blood, which can dilate the bronchioles. What are the net effects of parasympathetic and sympathetic is placed here in the mnemonics. Either diarrhea, urination, meiosis, bradycardia, bronchospasm, sweating, and salivation. While for the sympathetic, it's red as a beet, dry as a bone, mad as a hatter, blind as a bat, and hot as a hell. So we will discuss all of these effects. So let's now focus on the parasympathetic nervous system. So again, the cholinergic pharmacology and its transmission when the choline enters in a neuron via the carrier-mediated transport, which is the rate-limiting step via choline transporter. Acetylation of choline with acetyl-CoA by choline acetyltransferase. And this acetylcholine is packed into the synaptic vesicle at high concentration by the carrier-mediated transport, your vesicle-associated protein or your VAP, and acetylcholine is released through the calcium-mediated exocytosis. So 100 to 500 vesicles are released at the neuromuscular junction. That is enough to excite the postsynaptic cell. The parasympathetic effect primarily affects the several organ system, like the eye, which can cause contraction of the iris sphincter and cause miosis and contraction of the ciliary muscle. The salivary gland can cause secretion. The heart can decrease the heart rate, conduction velocity, and the contraction, while the lungs, it can cause bronchial constriction. The pancreas can increase the insulin secretion, and in the intestine, it can increase the tone and motility, while the bladder, the detrusor muscle is contracted and it can cause the sphincter relaxation. So these are the organs that are primarily affected by the parasympathetic nervous system. These are the neurotransmitters of the cholinergic receptors, the nicotinic receptor and the muscarinic receptor, together with their agonist, which is your acetylcholine, nicotine, and muscarine, and your antagonist, primarily the curare and the atropine for the muscarinic receptor. So again, the comparison of the muscarinic and nicotinic receptor. So the receptor type, muscarinic, is primarily a GPCR or the G-protein coupled receptor, while your nicotinic is ligand-gated ion channel type of receptor. Nicotinic receptors are again ligand-gated ion channel. So when the two acetylcholine molecule bind to the alpha subunit of the nicotinic receptor, a conformational change may later takes place, with result to opening of the potassium and sodium selective channel, and the influx of this cation will depolarize the cell membrane. Simultaneous stimulation of multiple nicotinic receptor will result to regeneration or generation of action potential and accompanying effects such as muscle contraction in the neuromuscular junction, firing of postganglionic neurons, and complex effects in the CNS. So that includes attention, arousal, and even analgesia. Nicotinic receptor also modulate their own response to the neurotransmitter depending on the acetylcholine concentration, and the response to discrete and brief pulses of acetylcholine is different than the reaction to a continuous presence of the neurotransmitter. There are two types of protein involved here. The GQ type of protein, so the activation of the inositol triphosphate diacylglycerol cascade leads to the opening of the smooth muscle calcium channels, such as here from the endoplasmic and the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So the cellular CGMP also increases, and these occur in the parietal cells, endothelium, and glands. In cardiac muscles, M2 activation results to potassium influx leading to hyperpolarization, while this is decreased in ganglion and smooth muscles. M2 and M4 activation causes inhibition of your adenyl cyclase in organs such as what I mentioned, the heart as well as the intestines. Enumerated here are the different sites of drug action, from the synthesis, the storage, release, the degradation, or the receptor, the reuptake are the different sites of drug action. And these are the list of drugs and its site of drug action in the cholinergic transmission. Let us now talk on the different drugs that acts on the parasympathetic nervous system. When the drug mimics the effect of parasympathetic nervous system, it's called parasympatomimetic or cholinomimetics, while if it opposes the effect, it's called parasympatolytics. Let us start with the cholinomimetic drugs. So these drugs mimics the effect of the parasympathetic nervous system. Cholinomimetics can either be direct acting, so that is directly into the muscarinic and nicotinic, or indirectly acting, that is its effect in the enzyme. So we will start with the choline esters in the directly acting cholinomimetic agents. The drugs that are included in the choline esters are acetylcholine, methacholine, carbachol, and betanicol. These are choline esterified with an acidic substance, your acetic and or carbomic acid. They are relatively insoluble in lipid because they contain the quaternary ammonium group and readily hydrolyzed and poorly absorbed in the GIT. Therefore, it's not given orally except for methacholine and betanicol. It do not reach the systemic circulation. So if you drink acetylcholine, most likely nothing will happen to you because there's no acetylcholine drug because of its short half-life. And the presence of the beta-methyl group in methacholine and betanicol, it reduces the potency at the nicotinic receptor, but it can allows it to have an oral activity and prevents hydrolysis in the GI tract. And being hydrophilic, your choline esters are not well absorbed nor distributed in the CNS. So there's a poor distribution in the CNS, and because they are primarily insoluble in lipids. This table shows the different examples of the choline esters and their susceptibility to acetylcholinesterase and their target. So looking at it, acetylcholine is the highly susceptible, while your betanicol and your carbachol, they are non-susceptible and to acetylcholinesterase, and methacholine is less susceptible. And their different target can either be both cholinereceptor or the muscarinic alone with your betanicol and methacholine, and nicotinic more than the muscarinic with the carbachol. What about the alkaloids, the other directly acting cholinomimetic agent? Alkaloids includes your pilocarpine, your nicotine, and lobelin, and these are examples of these tertiary amine, and they are well absorbed from most sites of administration. So usually there are plant in origin. So pilocarpine is used as an eye drop, while nicotine is found in cigarettes, and nicotine absorbed through the skin, such as your nicotine patch to help in the smoking withdrawal, while muscarine, a quaternary amine, is less completely absorbed from the GI tract, similar to your choline esters, but when ingested, it is quite poisonous and can enter the CNS. Chiefly, they are excreted in the kidneys and enhanced by acidification of the urine. So the nicotine poisoning from excessive smoking, you can just acidify the urine with vitamin C so as it can be easily excreted. So alkaloids can either be acting on the nicotinic and the muscarinic receptors. So your pilocarpine and muscarine, chiefly muscarinic, while your lobeline and nicotine, that is chiefly nicotinic. The effects of a direct acting cholinesterase on organ system. So in the eyes, it can cause contraction of the iris sphincter, can cause miosis and pupillary constriction. Or pupillary constriction, the ciliary muscle, there is a contraction for near vision, and when there is glaucoma, that you can use for the treatment is pilocarpine. While in the secretory glands, it can stimulate the sweat and lacrimal as well as the nasopharyngeal glands. And during toxicity, there is an increase in this secretion from the glands. In the respiratory, it can cause bronchoconstriction, so contraction of the smooth muscle, and contraction of the glandular secretion. So this is contraindicated among asthmatic person. In the heart, the cardiac effect is of these cholinereceptors. The main effects are lowering the peripheral vascular resistance and decrease in heart rate. So the reduced firing in the heart's pacemaker is mediated via the M2 receptor. The parasympathetic effect on heart rate, it can cause decrease in contractile strength with negative inotropy, and the AV node can cause decrease in conduction velocity, and in the ventricle, it can have a small decrease in contractile strength. Compared to the atria, the ventricles have less extensive parasympathetic innervation, and therefore the effects are more modest. The acetylcholine will elicit different effects on the heart rate depending on the dose. So at the minimum effective dose, IV infusion can produce vasodilatation, and this induces a reflex increase in heart rate. And with increasing doses, however, acetylcholine will also decrease the rate of impulse conduction in the heart and cause bradycardia. In the blood vessel, it can cause dilatation in the arteries and vein via your EDRF or your endothelium-derived relaxation factor. But at high dose, direct effect can cause constriction. So note that the arteries and veins are not innervated by the parasympathetic system, but it does have an indirect effect. The effect of this direct acting cholinereceptor in the GIT and genitourinary. In the gastrointestinal tract, it stimulates the gland, can cause the contraction of the smooth muscle, so there is an increase in intestinal motility, and relaxation of the sphincter. So all of this effect are M2 and M3 mediated, both on the GIT and the genitourinary tract. And the detrusor muscle can contract, so it can promote urination, as well as the relaxation of the trigone and the sphincter muscles. And as I said, it promotes micturition. So betanicol, for example, can be used for the spastic bladder. CNS contain both muscarinic and nicotinic receptor, and the brain has more muscarinic, while the spinal cord has more nicotinic receptor. So the nicotine at low doses, it is mild alerting effect, but in large doses, it can cause tremor, emesis, and even stimulation of the respiratory center. And with high level, in toxicity level, it can cause coma. While the peripheral nervous system, the autonomic ganglia with simultaneous discharge of the parasympathetic and sympathetic, because both of receptors, there would be nicotinic receptors. while nicotinic receptors in autonomic ganglion are strongly activated by the cholinereceptor activators, such as your nicotine and lobelin, and sets off the action potential in the postganglionic nerve cell. And nicotine has greater affinity for nicotine receptors in the autonomic ganglia. This effect is primarily in the nicotinic receptor subtype, your alpha-3, rather than in the neuromuscular junction. While in the CVS, the effects of nicotine are chiefly sympathomimetic, and that can cause hypertension. While the effect in the GIT and GUT is chiefly parasympathetic, so that can cause nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and micturition. Okay, so these are the direct effect of the cholinereceptor on these target organs. Nicotinic ganglion stimulant. So this is exemplified by your nicotine, which is a tertiary amine, together with your lobelin, and a synthetic compound, your DMPP, or your dimethylphenylpiperazinium. This can cause a complex peripheral responses associated with a generalized stimulation of the autonomic ganglia. So the effect is either tachycardia, increase in blood pressure, or a variable effect on the GI motility and secretion with increase in bronchial, salivary, and sweat secretion. Your most nicotinic receptor agonist affects both ganglionic and motor end plate receptor, but it shows selectivity. So it does not mean that if a substance is a ganglion stimulant, it won't act on the organ itself. Okay, so these are the examples of your direct-acting cholinereceptor agent, your nicotinic, which is a ganglion stimulant. That is your nicotine, your lobelin, and your DMPP. In nicotine toxicities, it can either be acute or chronic. So in acute, there is a CNS stimulation that may lead to seizure, coma, and respiratory arrest, because there may be a motor end plate depolarization, which eventually lead to a depolarization blockade and paralysis. It can also lead to hypertension and arrhythmia. On the other hand, the chronic can increase risk of cardiovascular disease like hypertension, coronary artery disease, and heart attack, and even ulcers. So they are treated primarily by behavior modification and by giving your synthetic partial agonist at the nicotinic receptor, and that is with your varenicline. Also, an antidepressant, bupropion, can also be used because this exhibit the non-competitive antagonist or antagonism for the nicotinic receptor. Your acute toxicity of nicotine can be treated symptomatically. So they can also receive diazepam, atropine, and even mechanical ventilation. What about the indirectly acting agent? There are three groups of drugs: the simple alcohol with quaternary group, the carbamic acid esters, and the organic derivatives of phosphoric acid. Simple alcohol with quaternary ammonium group includes your edrophonium, and this mechanism is initiated by reversibly binding to the active sites of the enzyme, barring the attachment of the acetylcholine. So the enzyme inhibitor complex lasts only for 2 to 10 minutes. While the carbamate esters, there are two-step hydrolysis such as the one described in acetylcholine, where it forms a stronger bond, the covalent bond with acetylcholinesterase, which is carbomy-related, and so that they are more resistant to hydrolysis. Hence, the complex will last longer at 30 minutes to 6 hours. While your organophosphates, so these agents binds to the enzyme and then also hydrolyze to become active phosphorylated enzyme inhibitor complex. And this bond, however, is very strong and stable. After this initial process, the complex undergoes aging, in which an oxygen phosphorus bond of the organophosphate is broken to form an even stronger inhibitor enzyme binding. So aging rates differ amongst the different inhibitors. So for example, some of the chemical warfare agent undergo aging within 10 minutes and some drugs within 48 hours. So when an oxime regenerator compound or cholinesterase regenerator such as pralidoxime is given before aging has occurred, okay, so as in poisoning, the enzyme inhibitor bond may still be broken and the enzyme will regain functionally. But this is not achieved once the aging has already set in. Edrophonium is the simple alcohol with a quaternary ammonium group, so it binds reversibly to the anionic site of the enzyme. And this bond, the ionic bond, is very weak, so the action is very brief. So this is used mainly for diagnosing myasthenia gravis, which is an autonomic condition in which the weakness is triggered after exertion due to antibodies reacting against the acetylcholine receptors. Comparison of these carbamates and these agents bearing the permanent quaternary ammonium are lipid soluble and therefore they are poorly absorbed from the intestine, skin, conjunctiva, or lungs. And much larger doses is required for oral rather than the IV administration, and they do not enter the CNS. The tertiary amine, which is physostigmine, on the other hand, is well absorbed and is also used as a topical ophthalmic drops, and it can enter the CNS and comparatively toxic than the quaternary drugs. These carbamates are stable in aqueous solution and metabolized by various esterases including cholinesterase. The duration of action of this agent will depend mainly on the stability of the complexes they formed with this hydrolyzing enzyme. The clinical uses are listed. So myasthenia gravis and ileus is treated with neostigmine and pyridostigmine, while glaucoma is treated by the physostigmine. The last group of indirect acting cholinesterase agents is organophosphate. So these are the long-acting or the irreversible agents, and mostly they are used as insecticides. So typically they are very lipid soluble, except ecothiopate, and this drug is used in glaucoma. So these organophosphates form a phosphorylated covalent bond, and the aging of which strengthens the phosphorus enzyme bond, and it deactivates acetylcholinesterase for life of that enzyme, so that enzyme will no longer recover. In order to have a new acetylcholinesterase, you need to make a new one. So the antidote for organophosphate poisoning is your pralidoxime. We will discuss that later. And this pralidoxime splits the phosphorus enzyme bond and is most effective that is before aging has occurred. Because once you give the drug after aging, it is already irreversible. And the problem here is that this pralidoxime is not widely available. So your organophosphates are a pentavalent phosphorus compound that contain a labile group, the fluoride, or an organic group. And this is inactivated phosphorylated enzyme that is very stable and can cause a severe type of peripheral nerve demyelination. This can cause nerve demyelination, although this is not well established. And so the sign of organophosphate poisoning or overdose, it can cause seizure and even frothing of the mouth. So if you have watched The Rock, when Nicolas Cage used your atropine as an antidote, so this is to prevent the organophosphate overdose. The nerve gas that can cause seizure or frothing of the mouth, that is due to excessive salivation and possible wheezing due to bronchoconstriction. It also promotes micturition. So the one that is used in the World War I, your sarin or your Soman or your Tabun, the nerve gas that used as a chemical warfare. So in one of the incident in Tokyo, that is when someone released the nerve gas in the subway, so that is the sarin gas. So pyridostigmine can be used before entering the chemical war zone, so it can bind with your acetylcholinesterase and it makes it unavailable for your organophosphate. So these are the features of your irreversible anticholinesterase, your organophosphate. The main function of these acetylcholinesterase inhibitors is enhancement of the cholinergic activity at the parasympathetic postganglionic synapse. So it can increase secretions and peristaltic movement, even bronchoconstriction, and it can decrease the intraocular pressure in glaucoma. And this is by contraction of the ciliary body, which facilitates the outflows of this aqueous humor. The cardiac effect, it can decrease the heart rate, the impulse conduction, and the force of contraction that will lead to reduction of the cardiac output. And there are only minimal effect in the blood vessels, both in the arteries and veins. Increase in secretion and peristaltic movements as its effect in the gastrointestinal. So it can be used for the postoperative ileus and neurogenic bladder. So these are clinical conditions that involves the depression of the smooth muscle activity without obstruction. The summary of the indirectly acting cholinomimetic agent, your edrophonium, neostigmine, physostigmine, pyridostigmine, diflosmine, your ecothiopate, and the organophosphates. They are differentiated based on the action, duration of action, the main site of action, as well as the sum of its uses. Organophosphate poisoning or other forms of cholinergic excess can be identified by these mnemonics, your dumbbells. D for diarrhea, U for urination, M for meiosis or pupil constriction, B for bronchoconstriction, E for excitation, because still there are some CNS effects, and L for lacrimation, and the double S for salivation and sweating. The central acting indirect cholineceptor agents, that is your rivastigmine, galantamine, and donepezil. They are orally active and lipid soluble. So they have to be, because they should enter the blood brain barrier with a very long half-life of 1.5 hours to 70 hours. So common adverse effect is nausea and vomiting because it can promote GI motility. So these drugs are used in the treatment of Alzheimer's disease. The summary of the cholinomimetic agents and its clinical uses. Now we will discuss the drugs that oppose the effect of your parasympathetic nervous system. So these are called your parasympatholytics or your anticholinergic drugs. Looking at this cholinergic transmission, so there are drugs that will inhibit the different sites in this process. Anticholinergic drugs includes your cholinereceptor blockers, so that is your antimuscarinic and antinicotinic, as well as the cholinesterase regenerators. So again, looking at the muscarinic cholinergic receptor, so when this is blocked, it will oppose the effect of your parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, let's start with the antimuscarinic agents. What are the antimuscarinic agents? The natural alkaloids include your atropine and scopolamine, your tertiary ammonium, your pirenzepine, tropicamide, dicyclomine, and benztropine, and your quaternary ammonium, your ipratropium, your propanthelin, and your glycopyrrolate. These tertiary amine antimuscarinics are often utilized in eye and CNS indication. And because of similarities in the chemical structures, many antihistaminics, your antidepressant, and even antipsychotic have a lot of antimuscarinic effects. Quaternary amines, because of reduced lipid solubility, therefore they have less ability to penetrate and affect the CNS. So your antimuscarinic agents can also differentiated based on their selectivity as to M1, M2, and your M3 antimuscarinic receptor. Your muscarinic receptor, rather. Atropine is derived from Atropa belladonna, or the deadly nightshade, and the Datura estramonium, which is a Jimson weed. So this Atropa belladonna was used to dilate pupils to become women more beautiful. And this is a non-selective for muscarinic receptor. Although the symptomatic antidote for as a use for poisoning of organophosphate, this is by acting on the M2 receptor. Atropine has a biphasic elimination. Rapid phase has a half-life of 2 hours, while slow phase is about 13 hours. 60% is primarily excreted unchanged in the urine, and the effect declines rapidly in all organs except the eye, which lasts for about 72 hours. On the other hand, your hyoscine or your scopolamine is derived from Hyoscyamus nigra, or the henbane. Your eye form of both agents are 100 times more potent than the D form. So synthetic and semi-synthetic agents are also available. The effect of atropine at low doses is minimal. So it can also cause central vagal simulant effect, that is bradycardia, that is supplanted by your tachycardia, which is the compensatory effect. The salivary, bronchial, and sweat glands are the tissues that are most sensitive to atropine effects, while with intermediate sensitivity are the smooth muscle and cardiac tissue, and the least sensitive are the gastric parietal cells. So atropine has significant concentration that is reached in the CNS 30 minutes to 1 hour after administration. While your scopolamine, it has a good skin absorption and that has been marketed as a transdermal patch. And in the therapeutic dose can cause sedation, drowsiness, and amnesia. And high doses causes excitement, hallucinogen, agitation, and even coma. The hallucinogenic point is somehow toxic and deadly. Benztropine is the drug used for Parkinson's, and this is well absorbed from the gut and widely distributed after absorption, in contrast to the ipratropium, which is the drug used for asthma and COPD, which is poorly absorbed in the gut. They are not taken up in the CNS because of the reduced lipid solubility. So that's the reason why it has a less ability to penetrate and affect the CNS. So the effect of your atropine, since it opposes the parasympathetic nervous system, so that is blind as a bat, because it can cause cyclopedia, so that is the near vision that is affected. Dry as a bone, because it can decrease sweating. Hot as a hell, because that is the thermoregulation, and fever can have this one because you don't perspire. And red as a beet, because the blood vessel here of the skin will dilate and radiate heat due to inability to sweat. And mad as a hatter, because of the hallucination that this patient may have. So the direct acting cholinesterase blocker. So in the ocular, the topical antimuscarinic used to reverse or block the pupillary constrictive due to this cholinesterase activation. So this produces mydriasis. The antimuscarinic can cause cyclopedia by reducing the ciliary muscle contraction. Hence, the eye cannot focus for near vision. This is also associated with reduced lacrimal gland secretion. Hence, the patient may experience dryness or sandy eyes. With CVS, muscarinic receptor blocker, especially prominent in the SA node, and tachycardia manifests with moderate to high therapeutic doses of atropine due to the vagal nerve blockade. And with low doses, there is a brief bradycardia before the vagal block appears, or the vagal block effect appears. Antimuscarinic can also block the endothelial muscarinic receptor that mediates the vasodilation in the blood vessel. So they can cause cutaneous vasodilatation in toxic doses, especially in the upper part of the body. And with respiratory system, atropine can cause some constriction and reduction of secretion because of the autoregulatory of M1 effect. The dilatation produced by this agent on M3 blockade are eventually opposed. So they are usually utilized prior to application of inhalation anesthetic to reduce the tracheal secretion and lowers the laryngospasm. So this ipratropium bromide is commonly used for treatment of asthma. Dry mouth as the prominent effect of antimuscarinic agent because of the sensitivity of the salivary gland, and the basal gastric secretion is also blocked. So this may cause the effect that is more on the basal secretion rather than the food, nicotine, or alcohol-induced secretion. Decrease in gastric motility, that is exemplified by your loperamide, when it reduced the motility and tone of the GI muscle, the gastric emptying time, and the intestinal transit time that are prolonged. With genitourinary tract, it can relax the ureteral smooth muscle bladder wall. Therefore, the voiding is slowed and promotes urinary retention. In the sweat glands, it is thermoregulatory, so the sweating is suppressed by opposing the stimulatory effect on the eccrine sweat glands, which contains the muscarinic receptor, so you don't perspire much. So these are the clinical pharmacology of the cholinesterase blocker. So atropine is the most commonly used for some diseases like Parkinson's, and even as used for the pre-anesthetic together with your scopolamine. And this scopolamine can use for motion sickness and vestibular dysfunction, mydriasis, and cycloplegic patient. Your ipratropium and your can be used for asthma or COPD. And this tiotropium and aclidinium has a longer acting and can be given once daily because of the M1 dissociation that is slow. Your myocardial infarction is when the atropine is given IV, and other parenteral and other antimuscarinic that can be used to blunt the vasovagal induced pain, or even the pacemaker impairment and depression of the cardiac output in M1. Neck pressure-induced syncope. So this is seen in uncommon cases of hyperactive carotid sinus. So atropine and related drugs may be beneficial. Chagas disease, the use of atropine can prevent the effects of autoantibodies in this condition, which attack the M2 receptors. While your traveler's diarrhea, the antimuscarinics are often combined with opioid-based drugs such as the combination of atropine and diphenoxylate. And lastly, your overactive bladder and incontinence can be treated by several drugs like your oxybutynin and down the line. In cases of parathion or nerve gases poisoning, large doses of atropine have been given. So that is the atropinization. So with a dose of 1 to 2 milligram intravenous every 5 to 15 minutes. So the endpoint here is with dry mouth and reversal of meiosis. But you can easily monitor your patient during atropinization by looking at the eye, and so that is the reversal of meiosis. And this may be repeated as long as you require it, because of the effects of cholinesterase inhibition may last 4 days. So this is how you do your atropinization. Anti-nicotinic, there are two targets, the neuromuscular or the NMJ, and the ganglion. So these are the ganglion blockers. So we'll start with that. The neuronal type of nicotinic receptor is the one that is blocked. So when we talk of the antagonists like your trimetaphan, your mecamilamine, and hexamethonium, so these are the drugs that belongs to the ganglionic blocker, or the blocker of the ganglionic transmission. On the other hand, the neuromuscular transmission, so the antagonist here involves your tubocularine, pancuronium, atracurium, vecuronium as some of the drugs that acts on this NMJ. These ganglionic blockers can either be quaternary or tertiary. Quaternary are the hexamethonium and tetraethylammonium, while your Tertiary is your mecamylamine. And these are the non-depolarizing competitive agonists. So this can overcome by increasing the level of your acetylcholine or nicotine or other agonists. What are the effects of the ganglionic blocking agent on organ system? The effects are based on the blockade of the predominant innervation of the organ or tissue. Hence, it is usually the parasympathetic effect which are blocked rather than the sympathetic effect, except in the blood vessel. So in the ocular, it can cause cyclopedia and loss of accommodation and moderate dilatation of the pupil. In the cardiovascular, it decreases the vascular tone due to the loss of the parasympathetic tone. Also, hypotension and orthostatic hypotension. It can decrease the cardiac contractility with moderate tachycardia because of the loss of the parasympathetic tone. And in the sweat glands, there is sweating that is impaired. In the CNS, the effect of the drugs may differ because the quaternary ammonium agents like the trimetaphan, they do not cross the blood-brain barrier, so that may be used to lower down the blood pressure during surgery. The secondary ammonium, your mecamylamine, enters the CNS, so it can cause sedation, tremor, and some of the coriform movements. The gastrointestinal effect is that the secretion is decreased, so there is a decreased motility and can cause constipation. And for genitourinary hesitancy in urination and urinary retention, and even the sexual function that is impaired. The other target is the NMJ. So these are the neuromuscular blocking agent. So the curium, no? Tubocurarine is the prototype of the non-depolarizing, while the prototype of the depolarizing is your acetylcholine. So these drugs belong to the isoquinoline derivatives, your atraconium, cistacurium, doxacurium, metocurine, your mivacurium, and your tubocurarine. So they are differentiated based on the duration of action and mode of elimination. So if you look at this, the drugs that are eliminated through the kidney have a longer acting effect, while the drugs that are metabolized by the liver are short acting. And drugs that are eliminated spontaneously or through the plasma cholinesterase, that is also short acting. So these drugs are usually given several times during surgery because of the short half-life. And there are some machines that can detect the paralysis in surgical patients. The steroid derivatives are your pancuronium, pipecuronium, rocuronium, and your vecuronium. So these are the NMJ blocking agents. All neuromuscular blocking drugs bear a structural resemblance to acetylcholine. So they all have the presence of quaternary nitrogen. And succinylcholine looks like two acetylcholine molecule, and this succinylcholine is the only depolarizing drugs. And large molecules not only block nicotinic receptor, but also iron pores because of their size. So the use of neuromuscular blockers have significantly increased the safety of anesthesia. Prior to surgery, the patient is intubated and initially sedated with propofol, after which intubation and giving of neuromuscular junction blocker. Because general anesthetics can cause muscular relaxation. However, it must be administered at a very high dose. And using your neuromuscular blocking drug, it can lessen the dose that is needed for general anesthetics. And because less anesthetic is required to produce muscle relaxation. This will allow the patients to recover quickly and completely after surgery. Another use of your neuromuscular blocking agent is muscle spasm control for intoxication, like in the strychnine that blocks the glycine and GABA in the spinal cord, and even infection like tetanus and rabies and status epilepticus. So its use for status epilepticus is when the electrical activity of seizure in the brain go on, but those of the motor neuron will stop. And there are two types of this neuromuscular blocking agent, your non-depolarizing and depolarizing, and the only depolarizing is exemplified by your succinylcholine. Non-depolarizing neuromuscular blocking drugs interact with the nicotine receptors to prevent the binding of acetylcholine. These drugs thus prevent depolarization of the muscle cell membrane and inhibit muscular contraction. And because this agent compete with acetylcholine at the receptor without stimulating the receptor, they are called competitive antagonists. So they can block the pre-junctional sodium channel. And at low dose, their action can be overcome by increasing the concentration of acetylcholine in the synaptic gap. So for example, the administration of your cholinesterase inhibitors such as your neostigmine, pyridostigmine, or your edrophonium. So the blockade reversal achieved through increasing the acetylcholine concentration. And there is a tetanic or repeated stimulation that stimulate the nerve, and acetylcholine is released at the synapse. On the other hand, at high doses, the non-depolarizing blockers can block the ion channels of the end plate, and this leads to further weakening of the neuromuscular transmission, and it reduces the ability of the acetylcholinesterase inhibitors to reverse the action of the non-depolarizing muscle relaxant. And like your pancuronium, these high molecular weight drugs can also block the iron pore channel. The non-depolarizing agent, the intended effect is motor paralysis, while the unwanted effect with your tubocurarine can cause arterial blood pressure fall due to the ganglion block and histamine release by the mast cell, as well as your vecuronium. The galamine and pancuronium, which is a muscarinic receptor block at the heart, which leads to tachycardia. So some of the non-specific action of this can occur because the ganglia have the nicotinic receptors. The property of the nicotinic receptor is they can modulate their own response to the neurotransmitter depending on acetylcholine concentration. And the response to discrete and brief pulses of acetylcholine is different than the reaction to a continuous presence of the neurotransmitter. So for the pulses, your nicotine receptor reacts as transient opening, rapid dissociation, and resumption of the resting state configuration because of the low affinity to its ligand. And with continuous exposure, on the other hand, the nicotine receptor is said to undergo a conformational change, so the so-called desensitized, so that is the phase 2. Okay? And in this state, the receptor develops the high affinity for acetylcholine so that the latter remains bound to the receptor for a longer period. So this delays the receptor return to resting state conformation. So prolonged receptor occupancy causes cessation of the effector response. And with further receptor occupancy, the membrane voltage eventually return to resting level, but the receptor becomes desensitized or refractory to stimulation. So in the neuromuscular junction, this produces paralysis. So the action of your depolarizing agent in phase 2 is that as the initial end plate depolarization decreases, the membrane repolarizes. So the channels behave as in a prolonged closed state, and the blockade reversal achieved through increasing the acetylcholine concentration. So that is with repeated stimulation or by giving your cholinesterase inhibitor for this, like your pyridostigmine. The intended effect again is motor paralysis of this depolarizing agent, and with the sequence of motor paralysis, commonly the eye muscle is involved more than the small muscle of the face and limbs and more than the respiratory muscle. So this bradycardia is preventable by administration of your atropine. And potassium release can increase the permeability of the motor end plates, so it can cause hyperkalemia. Intraocular pressure is increased with contraction of the ocular muscle and mildly contraindicated in glaucoma. Your prolonged paralysis, the plasma cholinesterase that is abnormal, no, so that's anticholinesterase drugs and neonates and patients with liver disease. Malignant hyperthermia, so that is intense muscle spasm. So with the rise in body temperature, treatment with dantrolene or the one that antagonizes calcium may be used for patients with muscular disorder. So those with malignant hyperthermia are usually those who are already have some form of muscular disease like your myopathy and trisomy 21. The last group of drugs in the anticholinergic are the regenerators of cholinesterase. Cholinesterase regenerators are the substituted oximes such as pralidoxime, your PAM, and your diacetylmenoxime, your DAM, and your obidoxime that can be used to hydrolyze phosphorylated cholinesterase and regenerate its activity from the enzyme inhibitor complex for as long as they are given before aging has set in. And the most common agent used is pralidoxime, especially for enzyme regeneration in the NMJ. However, your PAM and obidoxime have this quaternary ammonium in their structure, and therefore they cannot be used to regenerate your acetylcholinesterase in the CNS. So your diacetylmenoxime is the agent for this purpose as it can cross the blood-brain barrier. So in severe poisoning, administration of PAM for several days has been found to be beneficial. However, this is not, however, recommended for carbamate inhibitors. The pharmacology, the clinical pharmacology of the cholinesterase blocker, based on their structure, the quaternary amines that is used for peptic disease and hypermotility, so that is with your propantolene and glycopyrrolate, while the quaternary amine tiotropium is used for asthma. Tertiary amine, like your dicyclomine, is used for peptic disease and hypermotility, and pirenzepine is for peptic disease as well, while your tropicamide can be used for treatment of for iron indication, and Parkinson's disease can be treated by the tertiary amine benztropine. So with that, I have discussed to you the introduction for the autonomic pharmacology, as well as the drugs that act on the parasympathetic nervous system. So it is called as your parasympathomimetic or the cholinomimetic agent when it mimics the effect of the parasympathetic nervous system, and the opposite, your parasympatholytics or the anticholinergic agent when it opposes the effect of your parasympathetic nervous system.